high and lifted up, Abba. The only one high and lifted up. And I ask that you would reveal amazing things out of your Torah by your Spirit to our spirits in the name of Yeshua. Amen. Since we began Bamidbar, we have been doing what the book of Bamidbar says, which is Numbers. Remember, this is called in Hebrew, this book of Bamidbar in the wilderness. It's actually in Hebrew, it's Bamidbar in the wilderness. But one of the titles that the rabbis gave it is Sefer HaPikudim, which is the book of counting, the book of countings. So this is now the third teaching that we've been doing, the book of Numbers, book of countings. This is the third teaching that we've done about counting, we did God counting, we did Israel counting, now we're doing a different counting. This is utterly amazing. What I found and what I learned and what I have to say. It's amazing. Most of my teachings start with an anomaly, and this is, by the way, how you're supposed to read in Hebrew, in the Torah. You're supposed to be reading, and you're supposed to stop constantly and go, what? What does that mean? What is that doing there? That's weird. What does it mean? And then you go on a search and you find out. This is the typical way that Jews learn. So I was reading, and I stopped after, a verse, and I went, what? Wait a minute. And I read some more, and I'm like, there's no answer. And I read some more. There's no answer. And then it came up again, the same anomaly, and I'm like, what is going on here? So remember, I'm a school teacher, so my time is very, very limited. So it's during school, and I go on this search, asking on Google, what does Judaism teach about this answer? I can't find it. And I keep getting all these answers from Christian sources, and none of them even get close to an answer, not even close. So I'm left with this for a couple days, but I don't panic. I just keep reading and reading and reading, and I found it. I found it on a really cool site. And then God started speaking to me. This counting of the tribe of Levi is a prophecy. Not it's prophetic, it is a prophecy. Like if you read it in order, it just tells you exactly what's going to happen throughout the entirety of Jewish history. So I didn't know this. I'm like, what does that mean? It's just like a dead end. When I'm reading, it's a dead end. It stops. There's no answer to it. And then I got the question answered. So you're going to have to hang with me. I have to walk through each bit and part of it for you to understand this. It's very complicated. So stay with me. So we're going to start in Naso, which means lift up, which is a weird way to say what God is saying here. And that's the first anomaly that all the rabbis key in on. Jehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, take a census. The way it reads in English, take a census of the sons of Gershon. Now, we've seen this before. When God numbered, it'll say, lift the gulgulot, right? Remember what gulgulot is? Yeah. Skulls, right. Lift the skulls. Count by the skulls, right? Gulgulot. And then another time it'll say, pakad, which means visit or count. And this is the major word that's used in the book of Bamidbar, is pakad. It's translated count, but it really means to visit. And it can be used in a wide variety of ways, but it's used over and over and over and over for count in the book of Bamidbar. But then there's these anomalies where God uses a totally weird, nonsensical, illogical phrase for counting some of Israel. And that's the anomaly we're going to key in on. So he says here, Naso et Rosh. Literally means Naso, we just sang it. Nisa, banner or lift, something high. Nisa, Ram v'nisa, high and lifted up. Lift up, Rosh, head, singular. Lift up the head, not heads, head, singular. That's an anomaly. Of the sons, plural, of Gershon. Now, Levi, which you're going to see, is divided up into three tribes, or three families. The family of Kahat, that's the priesthood. the family of Gershon, this guy, and the family of their brother Merari. So we're going to look at all three families separately, but this Torah portion doesn't have Kahat. It only has Gershon and Merari. So we're going to look at last week's Torah portion to look at Kahat. So right now we're on Gershon. He's the oldest son of Levi. The sons of Gershon, of them two. This is also an anomaly. Of them two. So the rabbis go, why does it say of them two? Why not just say, count them? But it doesn't say that. It says, lift their heads, of them two. By their fathers' houses, by their families, from 30 years old and upward to 50 years old, all who can enter to do service, to do the work of the tent of meeting. This is the service of the families of Gershoni, of the Gershoni. That's what it says in Hebrew, the Gershoni. They shall carry the curtains. Don't picture curtains of a house. The curtains were this thick, a handbreadth thick. These things weighed tons, literally tons, 2,000-pound tons, more than one. There's also, you can see at the front of the Mishkan, the curtains form the Mishkan. That's the white ones with the cherubim on them. But on the front of it is a perochet, which is a curtain. It's this thick. And then separating the Holy of Holies from the holy place is another one, this thick. There were thousands of Gershoni. And so these thousands of Gershoni picked up and carried these enormous, enormous curtains. See those boards that form the frame? They're almost that thick. And they're 30 feet tall. Yes, 30 feet tall. So it says, and that's just the parochet. That's not the curtains that go from the floor all the way up, all the way across the top, all the way back down. They're much, much, much longer. So they're going to carry the curtains. They shall carry the curtains of the Mishkan and the Ohel, the tent of meeting, its covering, Mikse Ohel, and the Mikse, the covering of Tachash skin that is on top of it. So I have a graphic here for you that I made that has all four layers. The Mishkan means tabernacle. The Ohel, which is goat's skin or goat's hair, we don't know which, because it says goats. Make this out of goats, that's all it says. So this is the Ohel, the tent. Then covering the tent, covering the Ohel, is the Mikse Ohel, the covering of the tent. And then on top of that, you have just covering, Mikse. So there's 4 layers of curtains. This is a lot of stuff. So Gershon is in charge of all these, plus all the curtains that go around the entirety of the court. 100 cubits by 50 cubits. And they're in charge of all of this. Now the top one, the Mikse, is just, all it says in Hebrew is, make it out of tachash. You'll see in your translation, porpoise skin, beaver skin, dugong skin. Dugong is like, what's a dugong? Like, what is that called? Manatee. A dugong is a manatee. All kinds of other animals that Gentiles put into the translation because they don't know what they're seeing or talking about in Hebrew. The rabbis just call it tachash. They don't even translate it. Why? Because that has been lost. That'll come back with the Messiah. But at this point, nobody knows what a tachash skin is. That's one of the mysteries that the Messiah will reveal to us. So, they're in charge of all that, plus the parochet. Say parochet. Parochet. Parochet literally means curtain or separation. And there's 2 of them, one at the front of the house, the front of the tabernacle, and the one, as I said, separating the Holy of Holies from the holy place. And then it says the curtain for the door of the gate of the courtyard that is around the Mishkan and the altar, and their ropes and all their equipment for the service. So they're in charge of all, we'll call it the shmati trade. They're in charge of all the material stuff, okay? That's the oldest brother. Then in 429, later on in the chapter, it says this: the sons of Merari, count them. Does it say lift their heads? That was it. That was the thing that I got stuck on. That was the anomaly that made me go, why? Why don't they get their heads lifted? And then I thought, wait a minute. Did Kahat have their heads lifted? Remember Kahat, Gershon, Merari. Kahat's the priest. So I went back and I was like, did they have their heads lifted? Like Gershon? Which we'll get to in a minute. But Merari doesn't. All it says is tifkod. Count them. Visit them. So this was the big one. This was the thing that the whole teaching is based on. That one word, tifkod. The sons of Merari, count them by their families, by their fathers' houses, from 30 years old and upward, even to 50. You shall tifkadem, count them. Says it again. Never says lift their heads. Everyone who can enter the service to do the work of the tent of meeting. Now, this is the duty of their loads. These are the contractors. These are the lumberjacks. I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. These are the guys that lift all the heavy. These do the heavy lifting. The sons of Merari. They actually carry God's house. God's house is not the curtains. God's house is the boards that form this actual structure. That's God's house. Now, each board was, you see, again, that huge wooden arch, wider than that, twice the width of that, this wide. That's just the width, like the thickness. Like if you're in the tabernacle looking at, or outside the tabernacle looking at the width of the board, this is a cubit and a half. A cubit and a half is 18 and plus 9. What's 18 plus 9? 27 inches. That's how big the boards were. They're this thick, and they're this wide, and they're 20 feet tall. Where did they get that in the desert? That's another story. I've taught on that before. Now, these boards and the pillars are pictures of angels. That's what the rabbis came to. So Merari is carrying the actual house of God, carrying the angels, carrying God's dwelling place, his throne, but they don't have their head lifted? That bothers me. Like these guys, this is the baby, by the way. Merari's the baby of the three, but he doesn't get his head lifted. And this really bothered me. So, count them. Everyone who can enter the service to do the work of the tent of meeting. Now, this is the duty of their loads. The boards of the Mishkan, its bars. By the way, the bars are this thick, just like the bars that carried the ark. They're this thick, a handbreadth thick. That's like this. They're not little sticks. And it's 100 feet long. 75 feet long. And there's two of them on the outside and one that goes right through the middle of all the boards, all the way around. So however they carry this in the wilderness, it's got to be as long as one of those poles. Does that make sense? Because all of this has to be carried. It's bars, it's pillars, and it's bases. Bases doesn't mean a little thing. Bases are 96.3 pounds apiece, 1 talent of silver. They're like, what are they called? Cinder block. Like those big cinder blocks this big, that's about the size of a base. Actually, they're a little bit bigger. And they have 2 holes in them, and they're 96 pounds apiece, and there's 100 of them. And this is Merari's job to carry. Their pegs, their ropes, with all their equipment, with all their service, and you shall assign, now this is interesting, assign by name, in other words, to each Merari, to each son of Merari, the things each is to carry. This is the service of the families of the sons of Merari. This is really specific, but they don't get their head lifted. And this sort of made me mad at God. I'm like, you give them the hardest job, and then you don't lift their head? So this is where I was in the beginning of the teaching. I'm like really bothered by this. And I've got no answer. And I'm looking for an answer and I get no answer. So I was very frustrated. Down at the bottom you can see the enumeration of what they carried. 50 boards, and I showed you how big the boards were, 100 bases, 9 pillars. These pillars are this big, square. That's right, 18 inches, square. And then 9 bars. This is the only illustration I could find in the entirety of the internet that's even close to accurate. Every single illustration is awful. But this one's not really good too, and I fixed it sort of. See the bars? They had little sticks that they were carrying the ark with. Little sticks. These things are huge. And, at least this one had the blue covering over it, which they had. And the priest's garments are not bad either. They're just, those belts are way too thin. But other than that, this isn't horrible. Oh, I also made their beards longer. These are the kind of silly things I can't stand to look at. Anyway, so in the previous Torah portion is Kahat. Not in this Torah portion, the previous. So I had to go back to the previous Torah portion, Numbers chapter 4, beginning of it, and it says, Then the Lord spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying, Naso et rosh, lift the head of Kahat. So Kahat has Gershon, he's the oldest, has his head lifted. Kahat, he's the middle boy, he has his head lifted, but not Merari the baby. He doesn't get his head lifted, and he's got the biggest job. So here's the Kohanim. Sons of Kahat from among the sons of Levi by their families, by their father's house, from 30 years old and upward, even to 50 years, everyone who can enter the service to do work in the tent of meeting. This is the work of the sons of Kahat in the tent of meeting. The most holy things. That's what they do. Anything that's most holy, they touch it. You don't touch it. That's their job. So this word naso comes from nasa, which means to take up or lift up. To bear, to carry, to raise up. The word, like you probably have heard that scripture, his banner over me is love. Not what it says. It's the word nisi, or niso, actually, his banner. It means his lifted up thing over me is love. His lifting up is love. It's not a banner. And the word banner, which is something lifted up, is the same word, nisa, naso, nisi. Other verbs meaning to count. Now here's what the rabbis say. Why does it say count? Why does it say lift the head? That's a dumb way to say it, lift the head. Why? And they say there's other words. There's lispor, which is saper, which we'll see. And then there's lifkod, which is pikud, which I already told you about, which appears 77 times in the book of Numbers. And there's limnot and there's lachshav. These all mean to count. Why say lift the head? That's a dumb way to say it, God. And so the rabbis all go scurrying around to figure out what it means. Just like I did. Genesis 40, verse 13. Here's how this word is used, nisa. Pharaoh shall lift up your head. Now what's happening here is Joseph is prophesying from dreams to 2 different guys. One guy was the baker and one guy was the wine taster, which is actually bigger than a wine taster. It means a chef. And the baker had his head lifted off from him. In other words, his head was cut off. And this guy, Joseph said, your head is going to be lifted up after 3 days, which means you'll be restored to your office. And he says you're going to be restored to your office. So it uses this word, naso et rosh. Pharaoh shall naso et rosh, lift your head and restore you to your office. It's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. 2 Kings 25:27. It came to pass in the 37th year of the captivity of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month. What's the 12th month? Quick. No, not Elul. Elul is the 6th month. Come on, 12th month. I'll give you a hint. 7 come 11. Adar, lots. When Purim is, Adar. So, let's see, captivity, the 12th month, Adar, on the 27th day of the month, that it's not evil, by the way, it's Evil Merodach, king of Babylon, in that year he began to reign, he lifted up the head of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, up out of prison. This is exactly what happened to the wine taster. Okay? Lifted up and then restored to his position. Psalm 3:3-4. There are many that say of my soul, there's no salvation for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield around me, my glory and the Nisa Roshi, the lifter of my head, Roshi, my head. So this uses the same verse, the same word, these verses. It's always a good thing. It's always a good thing. So why does God do this wonderful thing for Kahat and Gershon, but not Merari? So these are the times in the book of Bamidbar that it says number or lift the head. When you take the sum, Naso et Rosh, of the children of Israel. So now all of Israel gets their head lifted. All of Israel. But not Merari? Because Kahat, Gershon, and Merari are not counted with Israel. So you have all of Israel, and then you have the Levites, or Levi, counted separately. And not only that, God says don't count the Levites. So Merari's really left out. When you take the sum, Nasoet Rosh, of the children of Israel, according to their pikud, their number, they shall each give a man a ransom for his soul. This is the half shekel. This is the half shekel. The half shekel of silver is what they made the bases of the Mishkan from. When you pikud them, that there be no plague among them, when you pikud them, when you number them. Numbers 1-2, take the sum, Nasoet Rosh, of all the congregation of the children of Israel. There it is again. Every Jew is counted and had their head lifted. Sounds great, right? After their families, by the house of their fathers, with the number, now here's that word number, misaper, saper or safar, misaper, the number of names, every man by heads, by gulgolot, and there's the skulls that they count by. Then Numbers 149, do not number, do not pakad, the tribe of Levi, or nasoet rosh, them among the children of Israel. So in other words, it doesn't say don't number them at all. It says don't number them with Israel. I'm going to lift up Israel's heads separately. Then I'm going to turn to Levi and lift your heads, except you, Merari. So I'm thinking, God, what did Merari do to get God so mad at them that they never get their head lifted? So then he says, these two verses that show you Kahat and Gershon with their heads lifted, Nasoet Rosh, the sons of Kahat. And then 422, Nasoet Rosh, the sons of Gershon. We got a problem. Merari has a problem. But I have a problem because I want to understand this. And it really bothers me deep down inside. It really bothers me. Not yet. Numbers 26. Then he says at the end of the book of Bamidbar, he says it again. Now that everybody's dead, and now there's new kids coming up, he says, now, Nasoet Rosh, all the congregation of the children of Israel. Why? Because those guys are dead. Now there's a new crop. Let's lift their heads before we go into the land. Very nice, yeah? But he never says it about Merari. Never. This is a pretty big anomaly. Remember I told you that the bars are, 10 cubits plus 15 cubits is 25 cubits. Oh, I was wrong. It's not 100 feet. It's 25 plus, what's half of 25? 24, 12. Okay, so 25 plus 12, what's that? 37 and a half feet. That's how big the bars are. 37 and a half feet. I was off on my calculation. So whatever this is that they're however they carry these bars for the tabernacle, got to be 37 feet long. That's about as long as this sanctuary. Okay? This is huge. How are they going to do that? How are they going to carry these things? Well, here's how they did it. This is what the carts looked like. Now, this is from a Jewish source, so I trust it. Look at these weird long carts, but that's why they're this long, specifically for the bars. They're way bigger than semi-trucks, by the way. They're bigger than semi-trucks, probably about 10 feet longer than a semi. The Kahati carried the holy vessels, the ark, the menorah, the table of the bread of the faces, the altar of incense, the bronze altar, and the laver. On their shoulders, they carried all these on their shoulders, all the holy things. But Gershon and Merari were given carts to transport their stuff. Remember what Gershon carried? What did Gershon carry? What did Gershon carry? Huh? Curtains, the shmati tray, the materials, right? All right, and Merari carried all the structural stuff, the heavy lifting. Yeah, the lumber. Gershon and Merari transported all other parts of the Mishkan in ox carts. Anybody know where they got these ox carts? I did a teaching on it about 4 years ago. Anybody remember? No? Huh?
Egypt?
No. In Egypt, they got them in Egypt, but who'd they get them from? Anybody remember? No? Okay. Teaching for another time. When Jacob saw the ox carts, he went from being Jacob back into Israel. He went from a flesh man into a spiritual man when he saw these carts. And by the way, this is 230 years before they left Egypt. Okay? But these are huge carts, only for Gershon and Merari. So Gershon got 2 carts and 4 oxen, and Merari got 4 carts and 8 oxen, because they're doing most of the heavy lifting. Now, let's start talking about the spiritual part. I'm very, very bothered at this point. Why Merari why can't they catch a break? What did they do to make God so angry that they can't get their head lifted? Now, the reason this is bothering me so much is because, everything in the universe is about me. And, saying, no, I can't catch a break. And I know you're doing the same thing because you're just like me. So I'm like, really bothered. What did he do? Why is God so angry? He's a priest for not a priest, a Levite for God's sake. And he can't catch a break? If a Levite can't catch a break, ain't nobody going to catch a break. So this is what one of the rabbis says. This is from the Midrash of Bamidbar, Rabbah 1. That means first chapter of the Midrash on Numbers. Israel was counted separately, and the tribe of Levi were counted separately, as it is written afterwards, and you shall appoint the Levites over the Mishkan of the testimony. When the Holy One, don't leave me, by the way. You got to hear every part of this. Every part's important. When the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moshe, but the tribe of Levi you shall not count. Moshe got scared and said, oh my God, perhaps there's a defect in my tribe. What did they do? What did they do that they're not counted with Israel? Just like me. Moshe was frightened and said, perhaps there's a defect in my tribe that the Holy One, blessed be he, doesn't want to count them. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moshe, I told you this to exempt them from the decree to come, that they don't die with the others. Then it starts talking about how much God loves them and why. Anybody know why God loved Levi so much? Anybody? Go ahead, I heard it first.
Because he didn't do anything with the golden calf.
Right. Because at the incident of the golden calf, they didn't participate, and not only did they not participate, but when Moses said, strap on your swords and go kill everybody, nobody would do it except Levi. And Levi went throughout and killed their own family members that did participate, and then their brothers throughout Israel that participated. And because of that, God loved them so much that God changed his mind about the entirety of the history of Israel and said, you're not going to be my priests anymore, firstborn. They are. Levi is. That wasn't God's original plan. Did you know that? Levi was not supposed to be the priests, the sons of Kahat. God's original plan, and he says it 4 times in the Torah, was to choose the firstborn to serve me, to be my Kohanim. But he changed his mind at the golden calf at Mount Sinai, at Shavuot. Well, not at Shavuot, but at 17th of Tammuz, when Moshe came down off the mountain, God changed his mind, and he said, I love these guys so much that I'm going to make them my servants instead of the firstborn of Israel. Now, everybody take up a half shekel so that we can have them be my redemption instead of you. And everything changed. But I'm still left with the question, why is God angry at Merari? Merari went through, their camp and killed people too. Moshe was frightened. He said, maybe there's a defect in my family. I told you this to exempt them from the decree to come, that they shouldn't die with the others. This is what is written, and you shall not lift up their head among the children of Israel. Why? Because the Levites are mine. They're mine. I own them. And the Levites will be mine in time to come, in the future. Now he's prophesying. It says in Numbers 3, they are mine. And in Exodus 26, in Numbers 3, it says they are mine, and then it says, and Levites shall be mine in the future. For whoever draws near to me, I draw near to them. Whoever draws near to me, I draw near to him. Whoever draws near to me, I draw near to him. Remember we did that whole study on the korbanot, the sacrifices? What does korban mean? A nearness offering, right? A nearness offering. That's the whole purpose of the sacrifices, is to come near to God so you can know God. That's all. And the Levites were there in God's presence all the time. And so God says, you come near me, I'm going to come near you. That's how it works. Okay, so now I'm starting to feel, okay, maybe there's something else going on here with Merari that I don't know, which is, usually what happens. Pretty obvious. But that's what I'm thinking. Then it says, they drew near to me, like it says in Exodus 32. And Moshe said, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves to him. Not Moses, to God. That's the point of this. They gathered themselves to God. And they drew near me, God says, so I draw near to them. And the Levites shall be mine. And not only that, but because they were found to be faithful with me, they kept my warning. You shall have no other gods before me. That's why they're worthy to be the faithful of my house. You shall appoint the Levites over the house, etc. That's what it says in Psalm 101. My eyes shall be on the faithful of the land, so they may dwell with me. Now, this has a lot in it. But if you can't unpack it for yourself, just know this. Just because you are born again does not make you close to God. Period. I don't care what the church says. That's what the church proclaims. They've been doing it for 2,000 years, so I'm safe to say this. They say if you're born again, you are now close to God. That is nonsense. All it does is bring your spirit alive. Period. The rest is how you walk. It's what you do that matters. It's what you do that makes your soul, God happy with your soul or not happy with your soul. And it can change any day. So I'm telling you, you can't just go around saying, oh, we are priests of God. Christ is now our high priest, and so we are the new priests. And don't tell me people aren't saying this, because I read it about 112 times on the internet this week, where Christians say, the priesthood is gone. The priesthood is no more. The Levites are no more, and now we are the ones who come close to God. That is demonic. It's evil. This is the pattern God set up. So, if you want to know God and come close to God, you got to do it the way he says. You got to come into this group, the Leviim and Israel, all of whom he lifted up their heads, except for Merari. So I'm still left with that. Okay. Now, let's talk about numbering the Levites. So, Gershon is the oldest, Kahat is the second, and Merari is the baby, right? But that's not how they're numbered in the Bible. Why are they numbered in different numbering? So now I start getting an idea of what's going on here. Here's what the rabbis say. They keep keying in on the order. They keep saying, yeah, but God ordered them Kahat first, then Gershon, then Merari. That's the way God ordered them. These were the names of the sons of Levi according to their records. Gershon's the oldest, Kahat the middle, and Merari the baby. And then it says Levi lived 137 years. Now, Gershon comes from garash, which means to cast out, to exile, to drive out, to divorce. This is a word for divorce. To expel. Kahat is it's an unused root. In other words, it's not used in the Bible except once. And it means to ally oneself, to congregate, an assembly. And it's very, very close to the word kahal, which is the word for congregation. Kahat, but it's only used here though. It means to ally oneself. And then there's Merari, the baby. Everybody knows what maror is. What's maror? Maror. The bitter herbs, the Passover, yeah? What's the name of Yeshua's mommy?
Miriam.
Bitterness. Miriam. Very popular name in Israel. But it means bitter. Sadness. Literally means bitter. And from bitterness to flow or to drop, like the way they get myrrh is they pierce this tree, and there's a drop that distills out, and they get that. It smells and it tastes disgusting. But then when they do stuff to it, they turn it into myrrh, which smells delicious. But when it first comes out, just like an olive, you ever tasted an olive off the tree? It is the most disgusting thing you've ever tasted in your life. I'm not talking about like California olives. I'm talking about Mediterranean olives. It is gross. But then you do stuff to it and it's wonderful. Well, myrrh is the same way. It distills from the tree in drops. And each drop is a marar. Merari, my bitterness, my sadness. But when he numbers them in this order. Kahat first in Numbers 4:1, Gershon second in Numbers 4:21, and then Merari in 4:29. Why in this order? And that's what all the rabbis key in on, and that's where we're going to get our answer to what is this all about? Why does God not lift the head of Merari? And there's an amazing, amazing answer to this. So in Hebrew, when it's talking about Kahat, it says, Naso et rosh b'nei Kahat, matoch b'nei Levi, lemishpatocham lebeit avotam. Lift the head of the sons of Kahat from among the children of Levi by their families, according to their fathers' houses. Literally what it says. Now the word Kahat, I've got some different derivatives here. Kahat just means to ally oneself, to congregate. But then there's Kaha, which means to congregate or gather, assemble. You can see where it comes from. It comes from Kaha, which means to assemble. And then Kehilah, we used to be in a small congregation called Ben David, and they called it Havurat Ben David. Havurah is a fellowship. But then when it got bigger, they changed the name to Kehilat Ben David. Kehilat means congregation. So it went from a fellowship to a congregation. And the word Kehilat literally means congregation or assembly. And Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes, in Hebrew is Kohelet. Now they translate that as preacher. Why? He's a congregation man. I mean, that's really what it means, a congregation guy. That's what Kohelet means. An assembler, a public speaker, if you want to say it, more lofty, a public speaker or a preacher, a congregation guy. So what it says is the Jews gathered in Israel. They were gathered as one man to the Holy Temple. They were gathered in Jerusalem. They were gathered as a congregation. They were the preachers to the Gentiles. This is when they went into Israel from the desert. They went into Israel and they became a kahal. They became God's congregation on earth and God's preachers on earth. And they're doing the sacrifices. And the sacrifices are preaching the gospel to the whole earth. If you wanted to know God, you went to these guys, Israel, in the land of Israel. And this went on for thousands of years, almost 2,000 years. And then everything changed. What changed? Assyria came and took away northern Israel, and Babylon came and took away southern Israel, Judah. This is the second son. The first son is Kahat. He's good. He's, the man of God. It's Israel, serving God. But then comes the second son in history, Gershon. Expulsion, driving out, exile. So now God's congregation has been exiled to Assyria and then to Babylon. The word ger means stranger. We translate it as stranger or Gentile. And that's what this word comes from, Gershon. A stranger, a sojourner, a foreigner, an exilate, as we call it nowadays, an exilate, somebody in exile. And the word garash, which is to push, to thrust, to drive out. It also means like driving animals. Like a cattle drive, that's a garash, because you're driving them, you're moving them. It means to divorce, literally to divorce, to plunder. And this is what happened to Israel. Now, I do not believe that God divorced Israel. I believe that God divorced Israel. For a while. No, they didn't divorce him. He divorced them. God says it. I gave you a bill of divorce, and I drove you out. But then another passage says, where's my bill of divorce that I ever gave you? Did I ever give you a bill of divorce? Show it to me. I never divorced you. So God's weird. One verse says he never divorced Israel. Another one says he divorced Israel. And that's exactly the truth. Because he divorced her, but then in Hosea, he tells the prophet to act out a picture to say, go get that hooker, bring her back into the house and marry her. And that's exactly what God did to Israel. He remarried a hooker, which was his love, who went out and had sex with every demon known to mankind. And then he took her back. So yeah, he divorced her, but no, he didn't divorce her. And that's why he says it the way he says it. All right, so the word for divorce is gerush, same word. In the Talmud, it's called gerushin, which is Aramaic, and it literally means divorce. So, this is the second part of Israel's story. Israel was divorced, sort of, from God. They were exiled, they were pushed out. The temple was destroyed. This is not good. But God says, I'm going to lift your heads. He says it to Kahat, and then he says it to Gershon. So far, so good. Now, Gershon's children are... Oh, I didn't go over Kahat's children, did I? No, I didn't. Look at Kahat's children. Sorry about that. 4 kids. Amram, Yitzhar, Hebron, and Uziel. So, just thinking about it, do you think the names of his kids are going to be good or bad? They go into the land of Israel, they're God's man, they're congregating, it's God's congregation, they preach to the whole world about God. You think his kids will be good or bad names? Okay, the names are Ram. Am, people, Ram, high. High people. That's good. Yitzhar means fresh oil, shiny, bright. By the way, anybody know what Zion means? Anybody know what Zion means? It means this, shiny, bright, same word. So, fresh oil, shiny, bright, anointed. Chevron, shalom chaverim, shalom chaverim. You ever heard that song? That means peace, friends. Chaver is a friend. Chaverim is friends. Chevron means friends, associates. All right? That's good. Association, conjunction, joining, fellowship. Like I told you, a chavurah is a fellowship, small congregation. Uziel, my strength is God. Don't get any clearer than that. So this is the first step for Israel. It's fantastic. It's all good. All good. Yes?
Is that the Amram that was Moshe's father?
Amram is, no. Kahat is this is a different Amram.
Oh, okay.
This is a different Amram.
That's what I thought.
Okay, so these are all good. 4 good kids. Now look at the kids of Gershon. Livni and Shimei. I don't get a whole lot of revelation from this. One's name is Whitey, right. My whiteness. This is the word for Lebanon. Lavan means white. It's also the name of the temple. In the Bible, the temple is called Halavana, the Lebanon, the white thing on the hill. And this name is Livni, my whiteness. But then the other one, badly translated in the Bibles and in Jusinius, it says famous. It's not famous. It's the word Shimei, which is a rumor. Like there shall be wars and rumors of wars from Ezekiel and from Exodus. You're probably thinking Matthew from Ezekiel and Exodus. It's this word Shimei. It means a rumor. So it's like heard about me or rumored about me. It's from the word Shema'ah, which means a rumor, a report. Heard of, fame. It could also be fame, but that's a secondary thing. So I'm not sure what this is. I do know that they were exiled and things went bad for Israel. I do know that. But looking at his kids' names, all I can get from this is this: that God looks down at them and sees them as white. Because he says this over and over and over again. He's talking about the generation in the wilderness who are horrible. And he says, I see no sin, no iniquity in Israel. In Numbers chapter 22. Then he says it about Israel, in the land of Israel, many times. In the Psalms, in Isaiah, in Deuteronomy. He says it over and over again. I see you, my child, you're perfect. So it could be that this is Livni. And then Shimei, it might be famous, might be, but I think it's more a rumor. Somebody talked about, somebody rumored about, somebody gossiped about. But I can't prove it. But I do know this. Ezekiel 11 says this. This is what Yehovah says. Although I sent them far away, I divorced them, sent them far away among the Gentiles and scattered them among the countries. Yet I have become to them a small sanctuary, a mikdash me'at. God, has become to the Jews in exile a mikdash me'at, a small sanctuary. Not synagogues. God will become a synagogue to Israel. And this, I believe, is true. That Jews congregate all over the world to do God's ways, to learn of God, to know God, to talk to God, have God talk to them. And this is God being, to his people, a little mikdash, because we don't have a mikdash anymore. Then comes Merari. So what do you think's going to happen? They've been exiled. I mean, I would think that the next kid would be, and God will regather all the exiles and will live in the kingdom forever, happily ever after, amen. That's what I would have done, but that's not what God does. He has a third kid who does not have his head lifted at all. So the word Merari, what it says in Hebrew is, B'nai Merari I can't say this word, Lemishbechotam, lebeit avotam, tifkod. Not lift their head, tifkod, count them, otam. And you shall count them by their families according to their father's house. Merari means my bitterness or my sadness. It comes from mar, which means a drop, like I told you, flowing down, bitter, gall. That's gross. Any of you ever tasted gall? It's just like there's nothing that can even describe how disgusting and gross this bitterness is. I have, and I'll tell you how. I made a mistake in butchering an animal. One year we were doing Passover, and because we want to find out how to do stuff in the Bible, so we got a sheep. It was a beautiful sheep, and we butchered it. Took the first time we did it took like 4 hours, 4.5 hours, but this was later on. It only took us 2 hours to butcher the sheep. It was done in the Bible times in 25 minutes. It took us 2 hours. So we did it, butchered the sheep, and there's a little green bag inside this animal, and you cannot hit that with a knife. If you do, the gall comes out of the gallbladder. If it hits the meat, it destroys the meat. So me, being manos de fierro, that means clumsy hands, I was trying to be so careful, and I nicked the gallbladder, and a tiny bit of gall came out. And that part of the meat we cut away, but like an idiot, I went like this. You know why? I wanted to know. I wanted to understand. Because, I mean, how many of you ever tasted gall? I never had. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever had in my mouth. It's undescribably gross. It is bile. It is bile, but it's pure bile. Not vomit. Stuff has happened to the vomit. Bile by itself is the most disgusting thing known to man. And that's what mar means. Mar. That's what it means. Myrrh, flowing down, distilling, a drop of bitterness. And marara, bile or gall. Now, his children, their names are Machli and Mushi. Machli and Mushi. Machli means my sickness. This is a guy who never had his head lifted. And his children have as names my sickness and overly sensitive, touchy. You're touchy. Everything bothers you, like the Princess and the Pea. Everything overly sensitive. That's what his kids' names mean. Mushi comes from mush, which means touch, feel. And it means sensitive or touchy to me, or I feel it. Mush or mashash, to touch, to handle, to feel, to grope, to feel something on the inside. But it's not good. It's not good. The word machli comes from challah, not challah like we eat. Challah, which means to rub down or to polish. In other words, worn down. You're worn down, you're worn down and worn down and worn down until you can't take another step. That's machli. So whatever is happening to Israel in the time period prophesied by Merari, bitter boy, is this. Worn down so much that you cannot go on. That's the last 2,000 years of the Jewish people. Now you, if you're not Jewish, number one, you don't care, and don't tell me you do, because you don't. You may learn to care, which is great, but don't say you care, because you don't care, because it's not you. All we care about is us. We're all self-absorbed, and all we care about is ourselves. We can learn to care about others, and it's hard, but it's possible. But for the Jewish people, ain't nobody care except God. But for the last 2,000 years, we have been Merari. Nobody to lift our heads. This is prophesied by the count of the children of Levi. And then God comes along and he says this: David will never lack a man on the throne. This is in Ezekiel chapter 43. David will never lack a man on the throne, never, to rule. And the priests will never lack the sons of Levi to offer sacrifices. Where have they been for the last 2,000 years? This is a prophecy of the kingdom. But it's been kept alive. God still has sons of Kahat, sons of Gershon, sons of Merari. And the prophecy of what would happen to Israel is in these children's counting. And Merari, being counted last and never having his head lifted up, is rubbed down, polished smooth, beat down, sick, grief, and then feeling all of it. Feeling all of it. Now, I used to, when I was younger, when I would talk to Christians, I didn't care. I didn't care what they thought, I didn't care what they felt, I didn't care. I was brusque, I was brutal, I was mean, I didn't care. Now I care more, and I try to shape things and phrase things that people can actually hear me. But back then I didn't care. And you know what I would say? I would say to them, you don't care about the Jews. And this is in churches. I'd be up on a platform in a church saying, you don't care about the Jews, you hypocrites. That's what I would say. I don't say that anymore. It was mean. But the truth is, that's the truth. Romans 11 says it's the truth. And I think that if we're smart, and I mean we, I do mean all of us, if we're smart, we'll look at our view of Israel the way God looks at Israel. Like this. So I wrote this from something I saw in this amazing website. From the cruel fist of Roman persecution, crusades, inquisitions, massacres, pogroms, Soviet oppression, the Nazi Holocaust, Islamic wars and terror, all the way through the birth pangs in the day of the Lord. Merari symbolizes the bitterest, most painful moments in our story when our foes aspired to put an end to the Jewish people and the Jewish faith. You think you got problems? I know I do. And it's so stupid. It's just so stupid in the light of this. Do yourself a favor. Read some Jewish history books. I mean, our life is so fantastic compared to what the Jews have suffered for 2,000 years. We're kings. We're princes and princesses. And we have everything we need. But Merari, not lifting their head up, I read this and I'm like, what kind of comfort is that? And then, I'm going to tell you what the website is. You can look it up on your own. It's called theyeshiva.net. Theyeshiva.net. And it has a whole article about this. And it says that there was a rabbi named the Chatam Sofer in the 1800s that looked at the order of the boys and how they were counted, and this is what he came up with. And this is before the Holocaust. And he said the first son is Kahat, in Israel, and they're wonderful, and they're God's man, and everything goes great, and they're preaching to the world to know God. And then comes Gershon, and things go bad, and they're thrust out of the land, and they're exiled, but they're still, with God, sort of. And then comes Merari, and they never get their head lifted. And here's what it says. And this just is so weird. I'm reading it, I'm expecting it to say, why, oh God, doesn't Merari? And you know what it says? Because they don't need their head lifted. The Jews have suffered so much, and suffering causes a person to be a tzaddik. If you want to know God, go to the Jews. You think you know God? Go to the Jews, and you'll find out you don't know God like you think you do. I mean real Jews. Jews who've suffered. Jews who care about the Torah and who've suffered. A lot of them are dying out now. Most of them are died out now. But if you can find a Holocaust survivor and talk to one of them, they say, we've done it. Eileen and I have done it many times. And they say stuff that just makes your head blow up. And they don't say stuff like, oh, God was so mean to us. They don't say stuff like that. They say, well, Michael, you better get your stuff together. That's what they say. Dude, you better wake up. You better look at this part of your life. It ain't good. That's what they say. They go right for the heart. We went and we listened to a Holocaust survivor in Las Cruces. I can't even remember when it was, maybe 4 years ago? Was that when it was? This woman, the kids went with us. This woman, very soft-spoken, but she went right for the heart. And she does it so gently. And there's all these Christians there like, oh, I love Israel, I love Israel. And I'm not mocking Christians, don't get me wrong. But this is how they were. Oh, I love Israel. And then I watch them at the end of her talking, and they're like, I don't know nothing. I don't know nothing. Why did I come to this? So this is what some of the rabbis, at least Chaim, the Chatam Sofer, and other rabbis have come to, that Merari never had his head lifted because he doesn't need his head lifted. He, above the other brothers, is a tzaddik. And this is kind of the same thing with the sons of Aaron that were killed. What were the names? Nadav and Avihu. Remember when they were burned up? Well, if you read all the rabbis, they all say the same thing. They weren't lower than the other priests. They were higher than everybody else. And so God took them to himself. And the burning came from the inside out, not from the outside in. Because they were such tzaddikim, and they wanted to be in God's faith. They wanted to be so spiritual that they didn't even walk on the ground anymore. And God said, you can't do that. You got to be here on earth. And so he took them. Sons of Merari, I suppose, are the same way. So this is what I'm telling you, that I know it doesn't feel like it, and it seems counterintuitive, but everything that we like, and everything that we're drawn to, and everything that we enjoy is bitterness. And the only thing that's not, for those who want to know God, is Torah. Everything else is bitterness. We don't know that, we don't think that, we don't live like that. But that's the truth. And I've got some verses here to show you this. Remember, Merara means gall or bile or bitterness. Deuteronomy 29, lest there should be among you a man or a woman or a family or a tribe whose heart turns away this day from the Lord our God to go serve the gods of these nations. I'm going to say it. To serve Jesus Christ. If you serve Yeshua the Messiah and you do Judaism, that's something. But if you try to serve Jesus Christ, you're lost. You may not be lost eternally, but you're lost in the world. You don't know up from down. Doesn't mean you're not going to be in the kingdom. It just means you're dumb as a rock. Just like we all are. We're so ignorant about so many things. Jesus Christ is not Yeshua the Messiah. I have a book about this, by the way, called Shattering Myths. It's the first in the series, called Hellenism and Jesus. And it details the historical fact of where the image of Jesus Christ came from. It's historically verifiable, and it will sicken you. Anyway, so in the Jews, if anybody turns to serve the gods of these Gentiles, lest there should be among you a root that bears gall, marara, and wormwood. So what's he talking about, gall and wormwood? Idolatry. Proverbs 5, but her, the adulterous woman, by the way, the adulterous woman in Proverbs is not, some chick who likes to have sex with other guys, with men who, are married. That's not what it is. It's Israel having sex with any god other than God. That's what that's about. It's a proverb. It's a mishle. It's a riddle. It's a metaphor. But her, the adulterous woman who goes to idols, her end is bitter. It's mar as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. It's idolatry. Jeremiah 9, because they, the Jews, have forsaken my Torah, have not listened to my voice or walked in it, but have walked after the imagination of their own heart. This is what Adonai Tzvaot, God of Israel, says. Look, I will feed them, this people, with wormwood and give them water of gall to drink. Why? Because they're doing the Gentile ways. So, might as well give them more. Be careful, please. Please be careful. Don't get sucked in to the way the world talks about homosexuality and lesbianism and Christianity and Christmas and Easter and whatever. It's so hard not to get sucked in. But I'm telling you, the end of it is bitter. Just such a bitterness you can't even imagine. Lamentations 3, remembering my affliction, my misery, marud, the wormwood and the gall. This is Israel talking after they've been exiled and the temple's been destroyed. Lamentations is a woman. She is Jerusalem, it says in chapter 1, verse 1. She is Jerusalem. And this is what she says. I remember my affliction when I turned away from God, from Judaism, and went to the Gentile ways, and now it produced nothing but marud and wormwood and gall. Revelation 8, maybe this doesn't mean what you think it means. I saw a star fall from heaven, and the name of the star is called wormwood. What's wormwood? Idolatry. And the third part of the waters, what's waters in the Bible? The Gentiles. Became wormwood. Became idolatry. Incarnate. Yep. And many men died from that water because they were made bitter. In our Torah portion this week is sota, the bitter waters that the adulterous woman would drink. Think about that. The adulterous woman is Israel. God says, you're going to drink if you've committed adultery. You're going to hold a jar, put water in it. You're going to take some dust from the tabernacle floor and put it in that water because that's what you did. You muddied up my clear water with your adultery. And then you're going to write a bunch of curses. Well, the priest will write a bunch of curses on a scroll and scrape the curses off into the water. Now, drink it. Now, if you've committed adultery, belly swells up and your thigh rots away and you'll never have children again. That's Israel. That's what adultery, that's what Hellenism causes. Now, if you don't know that, do some study and find it out. That Hellenism, the way of the Gentile, the way of normative Roman Christianity, its end is nothing but bitterness. You think you have bitterness in your life? It probably, well, I say this to me too, by the way, and I'm Jewish. It probably stemmed from something in that Hellenistic world that I ate or I was taught or I believe. And I took it into me, and it produces bitterness. So get away from it. Stop doing it. Stop thinking it. Do something else. Do Jewish stuff. Psalm 69 says, they gave me gall for my food, and in my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. This is prophecy of when Yeshua is on the cross. And he says, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall. That is disgusting. Do you know what that means? That means they got the gallbladder and pierced it and let it drop into the vinegar. Vinegar is bad enough. Can you imagine drinking vinegar while you're dying, bleeding out? And then they give him gall with it. And I've heard people say, well, it's medicinal and it's to kill the pain. No. It's just plain bitterness. It's a picture of idolatry. And he wouldn't touch it. He wouldn't touch it because it's idolatry. So we have Kahat, gathering. We have, because that's what his name means. We have Gershon, expulsion. And then we have Merari, bitterness. And this is the history of Israel. The Merari don't need their head lifted because they're tzaddikim. They can't get higher because they have suffered so much. They can't get any higher. If you want to, listen, I hate saying this, really. If you want to go higher, suffer. This is what Peter says in 1 Peter. We are called to suffer. That's what he says. Nutbag, Peter, what's wrong with him? That's what he says. We are called to suffering. And he doesn't mean as Christians. He means because we're Jews. Because they've suffered so much, they transport the structure, the bones of the house of God. You think God's going to let anybody else do that? But somebody who has suffered and know the bitterness of life? That's why he did it that way. They've drunk the cup. This is, by the way, these are the words of the rabbis, not mine. They have drunk the cup of God, not the cup of idolatry, the cup of suffering, just as Messiah has. Those are my words. Drunk the cup of suffering, just as Messiah has. So, I think, in my opinion, that this time period applies to us, because we're in the last 2 days, from the year 4000 to the year 7000, year 6000. We're in those last 2 days, and I believe this applies to us. So quit complaining about your suffering. And I say this to me too. Quit complaining about your suffering. We all suffer, but some of us suffer more than others. And if you suffer more than others, embrace it. And I'm not saying this lightly. I'm saying this to myself as well. So, sorry, pals, but this is the message from the counting of the 3 brothers of Levi. Isn't that nuts? Isn't that wild? Quit complaining. Quit complaining. Join us, the Jewish people. Join us. Remember, we read in the prayers, we said in the prayers, if you keep Shabbat, if you do it and learn from it and love it and embrace it, and that's just the beginning. If you do Shabbat, and I mean really do Shabbat, you'll ride on the heights of the earth and you'll eat the heritage of Jacob. And nobody suffered like Jacob. Nobody. And if you ride on the heights of the earth and you eat the heritage of Jacob, that means you will know God. But that does not come without suffering. Let's pray. Abba, you are so weird. You're so upside down and backwards to the way we think. And I ask that you would help us to repent of the things that we've chosen, the ways we've chosen, the paths we've chosen that aren't Jewish, that aren't what you want in our life. And I ask that you'd retrain us and reteach us. But I ask that you reveal to everybody who hears this teaching individually that you would reveal to us what we need to repent of, and that so we can adjust our trajectory and adjust our walk so that we can walk more accurately and we can know you better. Because ultimately that's what we want, Lord. We want to know you. We don't want to just have a blessed life. We want to know you. In the name of Yeshua, I ask that your Holy Spirit, your Ruach HaKodesh, would reveal this, that Judaism is your way, and that you gave it to us to know you. Reveal that to your whole body so they can cling to your ways and know you. In the name of Yeshua. Amen. Let's stand for the Aleinu, please. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. Let us adore the Lord of all, who in greatness created the world from of old, that he has not made us like the nations of the earth. He's not made us like the families of the land. He's not made our destiny like theirs, and he hasn't cast our lot with all of them. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol ha'aretz B'yom hahu, yiyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. And it is said, the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day, the Lord shall be one, and his name one. I always find it amazing that we're saying his name will be one, but we go, Ushemo, Ushemo, Ushemo. We say it 3 times, but we say his name shall be one. Isn't that amazing? Father, Son, and Ruach HaKodesh. Va'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malachei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. And we bend the knee and we bow in worship and give thanks to the King of Kings, the Holy One. Blessed is he. We acknowledge before the King of Kings that there's none like him, there's nothing but him. As Torah says, know that the Lord, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Ein od milvado. There's nothing else but him. Shabbat Shalom. Let's do Kiddush, please.